world watched with bated breath as the United States and Israeli operation, codenamed Epic Fury, culminated in the stunning death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This dramatic escalation, occurring just days ago, has sent powerful shockwaves across the globe, but nowhere have they been felt more acutely than in Moscow and Beijing. For both Russia and China, the unfolding crisis in Iran is not merely a distant geopolitical event. It represents a direct and immediate threat to their core strategic and economic interests. The sudden removal of a key figure in a pivotal allied nation has triggered a flurry of high-level discussions and urgent condemnations, revealing a shared anxiety over the stability of a region where both powers have invested so much. In the immediate aftermath, the diplomatic response from both nations was swift, sharp, and coordinated. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi wasted no time in labeling the strikes a grave violation of Iran's sovereignty and national security, deeming the action entirely unacceptable under international law. Echoing this sentiment, Russia's foreign ministry issued an even stronger statement, describing the killing as a cynical violation of all norms of human morality and an act of aggression. The synchronized rhetoric, following urgent talks between top aides to President Putin and President Xi, underscores a unified front against what they perceive as unchecked Western military intervention and a dangerous precedent for regime change. This strong verbal opposition, however, masks a deeper and more complex set of worries. Beyond the principles of sovereignty, both Moscow and Beijing fear the chaos that a wider war in Iran would unleash. A destabilized Iran, or worse, a new government that pivots toward the West, could completely upend the geopolitical chessboard in the Middle East. For years, Iran has served as a crucial counterweight to American influence in the region, allowing both Russia and China to expand their own footprints without direct confrontation. The potential loss of this strategic buffer is a nightmare scenario, forcing them to contemplate a future where their access and influence in a vital part of the world are severely diminished. The current situation is precariously balanced. While Russia and China have condemned the action in the strongest possible terms, they have notably stopped short of pledging any concrete military or even civilian aid to their beleaguered partner. Their official statements focus heavily on calls for an immediate ceasefire and a return to the negotiating table, signaling a desire to de-escalate the military conflict before it spirals completely out of control. This cautious approach reveals the tightrope they must walk. They need to project strength and support for an ally, but without getting drawn into a direct and potentially catastrophic conflict with the United States and its partners, a conflict for which neither nation is truly prepared. For the People's Republic of China, the stability of Iran is inextricably linked to its own economic security and energy needs. The economic ties between the two nations are incredibly deep and multifaceted, making the prospect of a full-blown war a matter of grave concern for Beijing's leadership. China is not just a trading partner with Iran, it is Iran's primary economic lifeline. Astonishingly, nearly 90% of all of Iran's oil exports find their way to Chinese ports, fueling the world's second-largest economy. Furthermore, China accounts for over 30% of Iran's total foreign trade, cementing its role as the dominant economic force in the country. A protracted conflict threatens to sever these vital connections, leaving China scrambling for alternatives. The most immediate and frightening risk for China is the potential disruption of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is more than just a geographic choke point. It is the artery through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply flows. Any military escalation in the region would almost certainly endanger the passage of oil tankers, threatening what many in Beijing refer to as China's oil lifeline. The mere threat of such a disruption has already caused global oil prices to spike, but a full-scale closure of the strait could trigger a global energy crisis, sending prices soaring and causing severe economic pain for energy-importing nations like China, potentially derailing its economic growth and stability. Beyond energy, China fears losing a key partner in its grander geopolitical vision. Iran has been an enthusiastic member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and a crucial node in Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. A friendly government in Tehran helps China project its influence across West Asia, creating a sphere of influence that serves as a counterbalance to the long-standing American presence in the region. The fall of the current Iranian regime could lead to the installation of a pro-Western government, which would likely unravel these strategic partnerships and align itself with Washington's interests, effectively closing a door on a key part of China's global strategy and leaving it more isolated. However, China's response is tempered by its own complicated relationship with the United States. With a crucial summit planned between President Xi and President Trump later this month, Beijing is prioritizing a fragile détente with Washington. Chinese leaders are acutely aware that any tangible support for Iran, whether military or economic, could jeopardize this high-stakes diplomacy and invite American wrath on other sensitive issues such as Taiwan or trade tariffs. Therefore, experts believe China will likely exercise significant restraint, perhaps using its non-interference as a bargaining chip to gain concessions from the United States, while hoping the conflict remains contained and its economic interests are somehow preserved. Russia's concerns over the escalating conflict in Iran are just as profound as China's, though they are rooted more in strategic military partnerships and the fear of losing regional influence. For years, Iran has been one of Moscow's most reliable allies in the Middle East, a partnership that has grown even closer since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Iran has become a crucial supplier of military hardware, providing Russia with a steady stream of drones and missiles that have been instrumental in its war effort. The potential collapse of the Iranian government or its military capabilities would deprive Moscow of a vital source of support, complicating its own protracted conflict and weakening its military position on the world stage. The economic stakes for Russia are also substantial. Moscow has invested billions of dollars in a wide range of projects inside Iran, spanning critical sectors of the Iranian economy. These investments include the development of transportation corridors, the construction of nuclear reactors, and joint ventures in the energy sector. A wider war and the ensuing instability would place these multi-billion-dollar projects in serious jeopardy. Even more concerning for the Kremlin is the possibility of a new Iranian government emerging from the chaos. A regime change could lead to a pro-Western administration that would not only cancel these lucrative contracts, but also actively work to undermine Russia's economic interests in the region. The fear of losing another key ally is amplified by recent history. The sudden and unexpected fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria in December 2024 was a significant blow to Russia's prestige and its image as a dependable security guarantor. Moscow had invested heavily in propping up the Assad government, and its failure to prevent its collapse has already damaged its reputation in the Middle East. The prospect of losing Tehran so soon after losing Damascus would be a devastating geopolitical setback, signaling to the world that Russia's promises of protection are hollow and that its influence as a major power broker is rapidly diminishing in the face of assertive Western action. Despite its deep ties to Iran, Russia's capacity to intervene directly is severely limited. The Russian military is already overstretched and bogged down in the grinding war in Ukraine, with little spare capacity to project significant force into another major theater of conflict. Furthermore, its economy is straining under the weight of international sanctions, making it difficult to sustain a costly foreign intervention. President Putin is therefore caught in a difficult bind. He is desperate to save a critical ally and prevent the further erosion of Russian influence, but he lacks the military and economic means to do so effectively, forcing him to rely on little more than harsh rhetoric. A full-scale, prolonged war in Iran would not just be a regional disaster, it would trigger a cascade of devastating consequences for the entire global economy. The most immediate and predictable impact would be on energy markets. Following the initial strikes, oil prices have already surged by over 8%, a clear indicator of the market's anxiety. In a preemptive move to calm fears, the OPEC Plus group, which includes Russia, announced a modest production increase. However, this would be a drop in the ocean if the Strait of Hormuz were to be closed, or if Iranian oil production were to be completely knocked offline. Experts unanimously agree that a wider war would lead to sustained, drastically higher energy costs, fueling inflation and threatening recession across the world. The economic fallout would extend far beyond the gas pump. Global supply chains, already fragile from previous disruptions, would face another severe shock. The waters around Iran are a critical corridor for international shipping, and a hot war would make these routes impossible, forcing cargo ships to take longer and more expensive detours. This would drive up the cost of everything from consumer goods
to raw materials, creating widespread economic uncertainty, particularly for the export-driven economies of Asia. The combined effect of soaring energy prices and disrupted trade routes would act as a powerful brake on global economic growth, potentially plunging the world into a period of stagflation. Faced with this grim outlook, the central question remains: will Russia and China go beyond verbal condemnation and provide direct military support to Iran? The consensus among leading geopolitical analysts is a resounding no. Despite their strong strategic alignment with Tehran, both Moscow and Beijing are seen as ultimately pragmatic actors who prioritize their own national interests above all else. As one Chinese state-linked media outlet bluntly noted before the crisis, Iran has no real ally, highlighting the transactional nature of its relationships. Neither power is willing to risk a direct military confrontation with the United States, especially when their own military and economic resources are already constrained. In the final analysis, Russia and China find themselves as reluctant spectators to a crisis that directly threatens their interests. They are deeply invested in the survival of the current Iranian regime, yet they are unwilling and likely unable to pay the high price of intervening to save it. Their strategy will likely involve a combination of loud diplomatic protests, calls for de-escalation, and covert attempts to manage the fallout, all while hoping to avoid being pulled into the vortex. The fate of Iran may be decided by American and Israeli firepower, but the response, or lack thereof, from Moscow and Beijing will shape the new geopolitical reality that emerges from the ashes of this conflict.